Hello, my name is Zoe and I'm the Storybus librarian for Leeds Libraries. I'm here with Dr Fiona Barker to talk about her third book, Suco and the Song of the Sea, as part of Leeds Lit Fest 2022.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're going to talk a bit about Fiona's process, the inspiration behind Suco and the Song of the Sea, and loads more great stuff for adults who want to know more about picture book writing. So my first question for you, Fiona, is this, Suco is the story of a young girl who meets and befriends a whale while diving. And on your publisher's website, it said that the inspiration for that story comes from the Amazon, deep sea divers from the Shima Peninsula. So how did you go about sort of finding out about this tradition and then researching it? I'd love to know a bit more about that.
A very long time ago, I saw a film about the Ama divers, and I was really struck by what a strong community they were. It's women who do this diving, and they dive together in incredibly difficult conditions. It's really cold in the sea, and they develop this ability to hold their breath for a really long time so that they can dive for shellfish. And so I was amazed by this sort of hidden community, really, of women that are doing this amazing work. I'm very sad because the film was explaining that a lot of this community is getting older, and younger women don't want to do this work anymore because it's really difficult and it doesn't earn as much money as it did before, and there are easier ways for them to make a living. So it's a culture that's dying out, even though it's very revered in Japan and Korea, where they do it as well. So I was really sad, and I wanted to write a story that highlighted how endangered this community was. And I saw parallels there between the danger that the community was in and the danger that sea life is in from the impact that we're having through our just normal daily lives of using things and then throwing it all away, and the impact of plastic and things in the ocean. So that's where the story came together, really. So I did a bit more research about the Ama divers on the internet, as everybody does these days. I started learning Japanese because I thought that was really important to understand a bit more about the culture. And one day I'd really love to go to Japan and meet an Ama diver. That would be incredible.
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, because I noticed actually that on the illustrations you've also got the Japanese translation. So are you confident enough in Japanese that you could read it?
No. So we sent the story to the finished text to a really nice gentleman in Japan called Hideout Matsuya, and he put the Japanese script on each page for us. And it's not actually a literal translation. What he did was he read the story and he read each page, and he tried to distill the essence of what's happening on each page into the text. And he's done that so beautifully. And by putting that on each page, Howard and I were trying to sort of pay homage to traditional Japanese art, which often has a cartouche of writing, either of the signature of the artist or the title of the piece of artwork on the side as well. So that's what we were trying to echo with it. But we felt it was really important because it's set in Japan to have something properly Japanese on each page.
Yeah,
that's why we sent it. And Hideaki was wonderful and did an amazing job at putting that script on for us.
Yeah, it really stood out to me actually, because in public libraries, we have quite a lot of dual language books, but they're specifically dual language and they live in the dual language section. And it was really surprising to see a picture book that just incorporates that anyway. Was really wonderful, and would love to see more of it.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll be able to do it again. If I write any stories that are set in other countries, I'll definitely think about doing it again. It's something that works really well when I do school visits, explaining what the Japanese text is. And I'm good enough at Japanese now that I can recognise where it says Setsuko and where it says whale, things like that. So I can explain a little bit about how Japanese works.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I was going to ask you about you going plastic free in sort of 2017, or sort of starting on that journey, and how that influenced Setsuko. But I feel like we've already sort of talked about that a bit. It seems like the setting and the plastic free elements sort of go hand in hand, and you couldn't really have one without the other.
No, it was a story that had to, for me, it had to come together, really. I've always been a bit eco. Growing up, my father and I used to do newspaper collections with a wheelbarrow around the local area, collecting newspapers for recycling. So I've been kind of recycle minded for a very long time. And when my daughter was born 16 years ago, she had real nappies and all of this sort of thing. But I didn't go really hardcore until about 5 years ago, when I did the Marine Conservation Society Plastic Free July, which is a challenge where you remove a piece of single-use plastic from your life every day in July. Wow. So it's kind of bite-sized pieces for you to remove one at a time. And that's when I started to take it a bit more seriously and do things in a bit more of a systematic way.
Wow. And then that environmental theme in the book, what I found so interesting was that it's sort of alluded to in the story, but it all really comes through in the images. And it made me wonder about the relationship between you and your illustrator, because you must have had to work so closely together to get that story that was your vision across through his illustrations. And I think a lot of people don't really know much about that side of publishing, so it'd be lovely to hear a bit about that.
Well, usually when you submit a picture book, you just submit the text to a publisher, and the publisher will team you up with an illustrator. But Howard and I were very lucky, because we had worked together before on a previous book called Danny and the Dream Dog. And the publishers were very kind and let us work together again. So I already knew Howard, and I knew that he'd be brilliant at drawing the sea, because he's a marine biologist. That's wow. His training and background. And I'd seen some images that he created of underwater scenes. And so I thought, oh, I've got this idea for a story about the sea. It would be brilliant for Howard to illustrate. And so we got in touch and we pitched it to the publisher. And luckily enough, they said yes. And so then we were able to create the book. But it was very much a team effort. And I was very keen not to write a book that was trying to sort of lecture anyone about plastic. I wanted the message to be quite subtle and secondary to the story of Setsuko and the whale and their friendship. So that's why the story about them cleaning up the ocean is only in the pictures. And Howard was just amazing. He's here with me. Howard was just amazing at putting that across and showing it so beautifully. And when I get children to look at the images, and when I read the story, I ask them to listen with their ears, but also with their eyes, and really look at pictures. And then at the end, when I ask them what it's about, it's quite interesting to hear their responses, because their initial response is, oh, it's about this girl and the whale. But then when they think about it and we look again at the pictures, then they see the next layer of story that's in there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think, from my perspective as someone who works loads with the under fives, it's really, really great to have something where the story is told differently through the pictures, because we are teaching children to read stories by looking at the pictures. And I think it's amazing to give them a bit of a story that it doesn't belong to the grown-up who's reading it at all. It belongs to the child who's looking.
That's why picture books are so great. It's because you can tell a story in the pictures and a story with the words. But there's no other form of book that you can do that with, apart from comics and graphic novels. Yeah. But yes, that visual aspect is why I love picture books so much.
Wow. While we're on the topic of sort of publishing and that whole world, I know that you've mentioned on your YouTube channel but there were a few times where you didn't think that this book would be made, and it was 4 years between writing it and actually holding a copy in your hands. And again, I think that's something, that process is something that a lot of people don't really know much about. So would you mind telling us a bit about what that journey was like?
Well, I think we were lucky that this was my second book with Tiny Tree, the publisher that brought Suco out. So I already had a bit of a track record, but it's always a long process when you're submitting to publishers, because you send your little book baby out there and you want everybody to love it as much as you do. And there's always a waiting process where you wait for people to come back to you. And I was so thrilled when they said that yes to this. So the gap between submitting it and hearing back was quite quick for this story. But then there's more waiting. Even after you get a yes from the publisher, there's more waiting, because then your work has to be illustrated if you're not an author illustrator. And of course that takes a long time. And if you have a look at Suco, there's so much detail in there. I think you can see why it took a long time. So Howard spends a long time getting things just right. And so there were several months where we were waiting for pictures to come back, but it's totally worth it. And then you have to fit in then to your publisher's schedule of other books that they've got coming out. So they'll have a slot for your book that you have to fit into. So you wait for that, you wait for your turn to come. And then COVID happened with this story. So it was meant to come out a year before it actually did. But COVID just put a complete spanner in the works for lots and lots of authors and illustrators, really. Everything stopped with real life. Obviously, it stopped for everybody, but it really stopped for publishing. And people were being very cautious. They didn't know what was going to happen in future, so they were holding back on lots of books. And that's what happened with Suco. So it's delayed for a whole year. And in fact, at one stage, it looked like, oh, maybe we won't publish it at all, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. So there was a lot of uncertainty around it. And I'm so thrilled that it is out now. And yeah, it's been brilliant. It's been a really good journey. But there is a lot of waiting and publishing. You have to be very, very patient, which I'm not very good at.
Well, we're all thrilled that the book did make it out into the world. Anyone who's watching who wants to read a copy of Suco, you can reserve it on our catalogue, or we should have a copy in your local library, because it was a summer reading challenge book last year. So tons of copies. So you should be able to find it if you just pop in. But Fiona, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been really interesting to hear all about writing Suco and publishing Suco. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be involved with Leeds Lit Fest, because I was born in Leeds. So I'm really pleased to be involved with it.